I know Portland underperformed this past year, but I think a large part of that was due to injury. I mean, obviously Nurk was out, right? But even like you look at Zach Collins, you look at I think Dame and CJ were out for part of the season. In addition to that, like I just don't think that when they added Carmelo initially mid-season that it fit well initially. Now, obviously, towards the bubble, I think it fit right, and I think he's going to be a great player on that team. Should they, opt to give him a new contract, because he'll also have Robert Covington, covering for him as a wing defender now, especially. And I think that was the big issue was he couldn't match up with LeBron. I mean, not many people can. But he was the only player, Carmelo was the only player that could really be the LeBron's defender, as well as Kyle Kuzma, and I mean even AD to an extent, if they were playing smaller. Portland were. So I just think adding Robert Covington is a huge piece. They're healthy now. I really feel strong about them, and I don't know how I feel about Golden State or Dallas. I mean, I agree
this
with
would
you.
be an argument for Dallas missing the playoffs.
No, I completely agree with you. I think Dallas is going to miss the playoffs. The more I think about it, because I put a huge asterisk on Kristaps. I think Kristaps isn't going to be healthy for a majority of the season.
Yeah, it's a big question mark at a minimum.
And even though Dwight Powell wasn't at the bubble and he was a huge player, and JJ Barea I think as well, I don't know if their acquisitions, midseason acquisitions, or the lack thereof, really, just getting rid of Seth really is enough. But I think they'll end up moving on pretty well. One team I really want to talk about is New Orleans, and I say it like a real Southerner. It's New Orleans. It's not New Orleans. I'm just saying that for the record. I love that city, and I think Zion is probably the best thing that happened to them since the beignet or Bourbon Street, really. But I think he operating with Ingram and and Lonzo, I've always loved those two, being a Lakers faithful myself. I think that's just a great dynamic. You throw in the other complementary pieces, it could really come together as a potential team. They really made a run towards the end of the season. Losing Drew Holiday might come to haunt them in the short term in terms of trying to make the playoff picture.
You think they're going to miss the playoffs?
I think because of that trade, if there's no acquisitions, considering how healthy players like Lonzo Ball and Zion Williamson have been in recent history, I'm just going to lean towards the idea that they do miss out in my hypothetical playoff picture.
They should be expected to miss. They could make it if Zion makes a jump to all-star, superstar.
I mean, same with Ingram. Ingram has to keep a great production level.
He has to keep his pace. He played earlier. If he just does what he did last year, that would be overperforming enough where they'd be satisfied. If they compare that with a Zion that turns into MVP candidate, they'd be set.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the Zion making that jump is not a guarantee at all. And they should expect to miss the playoffs.
Okay, so something that a lot of people say, and even I find myself saying this, when Steph Curry is healthy, he is a top 5 player in the NBA. And he is definitely in the pantheon of NBA players, somewhere in the top 20 players. It's arguable, 25 maybe, but he's up there for sure. How do you feel about Golden State after this Clay injury? It sucks, man. Even as a Lakers fan, I love to see players play. And no one wants to see injuries, let alone an Achilles to another player on the same team that got the initial Achilles of Kevin Durant. That's just unlucky. But how do you feel about that team and that roster looking right now?
Honestly, as unfortunate as this sounds for the Warriors, I think it kind of depends a lot on James Wiseman.
Really?
To see if he can produce, kind of put them over the hump. Because it's kind of interesting. If you remember last year, They were missing Clay and KD, and they only had Steph and Draymond. And they started
Steph for 5 games, just for the
and they started poorly. Like, that team at that moment was not expected to be much of anything at all. Like, it would have been a surprise last year if they made the playoffs.
For sure.
Before Steph and Draymond got injured.
Okay, but
and they're kind of in the same spot now, plus Wiggins and plus
Kelly Oubre. Also,
and Kelly Oubre.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Like, I agree with you. You know, last season they looked awful, and it's Steve Kerr made the right decision in tanking, and they got really lucky getting the 2nd overall. I was really unhappy with that they got that, considering how good and the pedigree of the players on that team were. But I mean, I agree with you. James Wiseman is really important and imperative for their playoff picture and their playoff run. But, like, okay, you're telling me that Steph Curry is a top 5 player in the NBA when he's healthy, right? And
yeah.
So James Harden's probably just missing out that cut, right? Maybe he's right. Like, you gotta
ballpark.
Right,
ballpark
it. He's probably 6 or 7, right up with AD. But my thing is, like, James Harden has consistently dragged teams to the playoff in the West. Can Steph do it? That's my question for him and his legacy. I know it sucks, but that's the real question, because he can't sit out a whole nother season now that his Splash brother is out. He's got to fight. I love Kelly Oubre. I think he's going to be a solid 10 to 15 points per game. Wiggins is probably in that 15 to 20 points per game. And so is Wiseman. I think they've got potential to really go 7-man strong, like deep strong. And I think that is something I really look forward to. I think we're going to probably talk about there's one more team that I really want to talk about in the West, and we might call it after that.
The Timberwolves.
It's got to be the Timberwolves. Draft night happened recently, and they didn't go for LaMelo Ball or James Wiseman. They went Anthony Edwards. Let's talk about that for a second. We're not draft scouts by any means, but how do you feel about him? What do you like? He's a 6'3" shooting guard. He can kind of handle the ball in the pick and roll a little bit. Production-wise, he's probably looking to be a solid, 15, 20 points per game right off the bat, like just off of his confidence in his play in Georgia. What do you think of how he could be?
My instinct is that it was kind of a bad pick.
Okay, let's
I
talk
can
about
see
that.
him like being a little positionally. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. They didn't need that. Maybe they just like him a lot. Maybe
they have a lot of wings too.
Maybe they think he can be way better than D'Angelo Russell. If that's what their scouting department thinks, then maybe. Obviously, he's one of the top talents. They didn't mess up that bad. But I don't think it's a great position fit, and there's been interviews about him not wanting to watch basketball in his free time, and interest is generally correlated to results.
Yeah.
Like passion and results are correlated.
I
can just see that not working out a large percentage of the time.
There's this interview with Damian Lillard. I think it was with JJ Redick podcast, and I think Damian Lillard talked about how a lot of the younger generation doesn't watch basketball. They just play video games and stuff. And
Josh Hart.
You're not trying to call out names, man. But one of the things that both JJ and Dame said was that these younger players coming in the league, they're just not going to be as able to smoothly fit in, and you're gonna have guys game prepping for you if you're a LaMelo Ball, an Anthony Edwards, or a James Wiseman. And if you're not doing everything to watch every other team, and you haven't been doing that consistently for the last couple of years, you're not gonna know a lot. Like, you're not gonna know that JJ Redick likes to go to his right to shoot. You're not gonna know certain things about certain players. And I think that's going to be detrimental to the long-term relationship and nature of Anthony Edwards at the Timberwolves, considering the past that they've had with Jimmy Butler and all them.
Maybe. Timberwolves lost the Jimmy Butler breakup. Karl Anthony Towns looks pretty disappointing right about now. And D'Angelo Russell looks alright, but he was just never the type of player that was going to bring them from bottom 5 team to playoff contender.